I'm here with Dr. Neal Barnard today for the second in a series on power foods for the brain. In case you don't know, Dr. Neal Barnard is the president of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. He is the head of the Barnard Medical Center. Wow. And has written a plethora of books and articles. Oh my gosh, amazing. So thank you so much for being here today.
Great to be with you.
Well, I'm excited because I'm a chemistry teacher, so this is just like right up my alley because we're going to be talking about how to shield ourselves from toxic metals. So in the brain, we talked about this in the last video, but in the brain with somebody who has Alzheimer's disease, you typically find beta amyloid plaques. So if you were to break apart this plaque, what are you going to find inside?
Yes, these are the microscopic plaques that are between the brain cells, and they've been known to be in Alzheimer's brains for a long time. For a long time, this has been known. And if you break them open, you do find the protein that you described, the beta amyloid protein. It's there. There's cholesterol in them, but there also are metals in them, particularly iron and copper. And that's troublesome because unlike other metals, iron and copper are quite unstable. They oxidize like a rusted pan, and we're concerned that that may be what is causing the brain damage.
But wait. Don't we need copper? Don't we need iron in our body?
Yes, you sure do. As I guess most people know, that iron is an important part of hemoglobin for your blood cells, so it helps you transport oxygen. If you don't have it, you're in trouble. Copper is involved in a number of enzymatic functions, and you clearly need copper. However, we've known for a long time that when people have too much of these metals, there's toxicity to that. They're poisonous. So you need a tiny amount, but you don't need a lot. And the reason this is so important, back in the 1950s and 1960s, you turn on the TV and there'd be commercials for, if you have iron poor blood, you should take Geritol.
Of course.
And the idea was, we need to make sure you get plenty of iron, or red meat. The more iron, the better. And that was sort of naive thinking. We now know that a little bit is essential, but a lot is not what you need.
Well, we've been in that society, that mentality. Well, if a spoonful is good, a ton should be great. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. But not true. And the studies have really been quite worrisome, particularly with regard to copper and iron, that we don't want to overdose on these because they've been linked to lots of health issues. But the brain damage is the part that is the most concerning.
Well, are iron and copper unstable? Are they? How is that? What causes them to be unstable?
Okay, they oxidize readily. You take a cast iron pan, and if you had a barbecue, and a week later you think, oh, I left my pan out on the picnic table, and it rained last week. You know, your cast iron does not look the way it is supposed to look. It's all orange from oxidation, rust. Same with copper. You take a copper penny, and you just let it sit there, and don't do anything to it, and it gradually oxidizes too. It turns brown, it turns black. So iron and copper are transitional metals that oxidize. And they oxidize in a pan or in a penny, but they also, here's the key part, they oxidize in your body. So you have tiny traces of them in foods. The individual molecules are absorbed, and they oxidize in your body. As they oxidize, they encourage the production of free radicals, which are little, I think of them as sort of sparks that fly around in the bloodstream causing damage. And so an excess of iron, excess of copper is going to mean more free radical production and more damage to the body tissues. So if those tissues happen to be your skin, faster wrinkling. If it happens to be your brain, faster brain damage. At least that's what we believe.
Well, I keep hearing about free radicals and all the issues they're causing in our bodies. Just what are these pesky little things? How are they formed, and what are they doing to us?
For the most part, they're oxygen molecules. It can be other molecules too, like nitrogen, but most are oxygen. And if you think about a molecule in the nucleus, you have your protons and neutrons in there, and zooming around them like planets are all the electrons. And that's what becomes unstable, is they can get an inappropriate number of electrons, or electrons in unstable orbits. So you can think of this stable molecule suddenly becoming unstable. And what it wants to do is to get stable again by taking a chunk out of you. So it says, there's some electrons over there or whatever. So it will attack other tissues, not realizing that's your brain cell that it's attacking, or your skin cell, or the artery wall, or whatever it is. So simply put, there are oxygen and sometimes nitrogen molecules that have become unstable. And in their search for stability, they are busily damaging your tissues.
Oh, gosh.
Well, this is not all bad. Free radicals have a role. If you have a pathogen, a bacterium that has entered your body, as part of the inflammatory process, your white blood cells make free radicals, and they sick them on the invading bacteria or invading viruses. That's their good part. But when they are attacking you, it's not so good.
Is that a problem?
That's a problem. That's a problem. And so iron and copper encourage the formation of extra free radicals, and that's why it's not so good. And by the way, lest anyone think that I'm making this up, let me share a couple of studies with you, if you don't mind.
Well, that was my next question. You must be reading my mind. Go ahead.
All right. Let me start. There was a study in Rome, 64 women. Not a huge study, but an important study, because the women did not have Alzheimer's disease. They did not have memory problems. But what the researchers did is they did a battery of memory tests, reasoning tests, cognitive tests of various kinds. Turned out the women who had the most copper in their blood had the worst performance on this battery of memory tests. Now, 64 people, not very much. So in San Diego, at the University of California, San Diego, a large group of well over 1,000 participants, effectively the same thing. Those people with the most copper in their blood had the poorest short-term memory, the poorest long-term memory, and all within the bounds of normal. So that day where you get up and you just don't feel like yourself and you're kind of forgetful, your friends don't notice, you're still driving, you're still yourself, but that's the kind of difference that high copper intake in young, otherwise healthy people starts to damage the brain. And then what we believe is happening is that this same process just keeps going. And so as the brain cells are destroyed and the connections between cells are destroyed, that's when you start to see Alzheimer's. One last study, let me just share this with you. In the Chicago Health and Aging Project, which is a great study out of Rush University, started in 1993, they've tracked all kinds of aspects of the diet. Bad fats, like saturated fat and bacon and cheese and whatnot, but also metals. And they came up with a stunning finding that those people who ate the most bad fats, and when I say bad fat, I'm going to mean a saturated fat, dairy products, meat, but also the trans fats, which are in a lot of snack foods.
Right.
Hydrogenated oils is what they are. The people who ate the most bad fats and got the most copper, when you looked at their cognition, it was the equivalent of 19 years of aging. In other words, their performance was eroded by about 19 years. So a 60-year-old was performing like a 79-year-old person.
Oh my gosh!
So now these are observational studies, and nobody is going to do a study where they say, "Hi, let's take 100 people and have 50 of them eat brain-damaging chemicals." So that puts us in a kind of a tough spot.
Yeah.
And you would never do such a thing on animals. It wouldn't tell you anything. It would be cruel anyway.
Right.
But the scientific evidence from observational studies, it's just like with tobacco. Nobody did a randomized trial with tobacco. You don't need to, because the evidence is just so strong. And that's where we're going with metals.
You talked about these bad fats. Okay. How do they salt the brain, these metals and the bad fats?
We don't know exactly why they conspire the way they do. But the way the ballet seems to be playing out is that the bad fats raise cholesterol levels. They do that in your blood, but they also do that in the brain. And there's something about cholesterol that may encourage the production of these beta amyloid proteins or encourage their clumping, something like, we're not 100% sure. And then the metals come in probably through free radical production is my best guess. But who knows? We really don't know. Let me distinguish what we know from what we're kind of guessing about. What we know is that when people have high levels of copper, their memory is harmed. We know that people who have high levels of copper at higher risk for Alzheimer's, same for iron, and same for aluminum, which we should talk about too. But what we don't know is exactly how. We know that these all have neurotoxic potential. There's a disease called Wilson's disease where people have a genetic abnormality where they tend to run high in copper, and it can lead to cognitive problems. So that's kind of where we are. So the bottom line is, while scientists are trying to figure out what the heck is going on in the brain, the message is, let's get the iron and copper you need, but not the excess. Let's not overdo it. So the old 1950s idea of the more the better, let's stop that. That's our message.
Right. Well, in our last video, we talked about the role of the APOE4 allele,
Right.
and that gene being linked to Alzheimer's. So is there a relationship between this gene and metals? What's going on here?
Yeah. There's a really fascinating thing. As you'll recall, the bad actor is the ApoE epsilon 4 allele. If you got that from both parents, your risk of Alzheimer's is 10 to 15 times higher. The better ones, the safer ones, are 2 and 3. Well, it turns out that ApoE E2 and 3 seem to produce proteins that bind copper. So, in other words, they might be protecting the brain because the copper is coming in and they're able to bind it and take it out of harm's way, whereas epsilon 4 doesn't do that. So if you got the 4, it will not help you. Now, it may act in other ways too, but the copper researchers were thrilled to find this because this helps provide some of the explanation.
Wow. Well, what is hemochromatosis, and what are the issues that this causes in our body?
Yeah, hemochromatosis is a condition of iron overload, basically. It can be a primary where for some genetic reason, and there's more than one genetic reason, your body can have trouble eliminating excess iron, or it's producing it for whatever reason. The other thing is you can get iron overload from other reasons, multiple transfusions, for example, or taking iron supplements. I was a little tired, so I took iron. In fact, I've been tired every day, so I've been taking lots of iron. You're overdosing on iron, and you're giving yourself effectively hemochromatosis, except you gave it to yourself. It's not genetic in that case. Yeah, so here's the problem. What we had known for a long time is it's bad for the heart. This assault of iron can damage the heart, can damage the vasculature, we believe. The new part is, just like with so many other things, what's bad for the heart seems to be bad for the brain too. You've got those delicate blood vessels going through to the brain, and we believe that excess iron of hemochromatosis can damage the brain, but not just in people at genetic risk. This can be in anybody who is overdosing on iron, because it's easy to get more iron in. It's kind of hard to get it out.
Well, I remember my mother giving us supplements as kids,
Right.
and I'm sure that's yeah, we got an accumulation of that from those.
Yeah, but that should stop. You get a 1-a-day vitamin. And I don't mean any particular brand, all of them, any daily multiple vitamin. They're good in certain ways. They've got vitamin B12, that's great. They got vitamin D if you're not getting sun, vitamin D in a supplement, that's good. However, they throw a lot of stuff in those pills that you are already getting from food, like you're getting iron from food. You're eating your green leafy vegetables, you're getting iron. They add more. You're getting copper from a wide variety of foods. There's copper in food. So why do they add it to the multiple vitamin? By the way, you actually don't need multiple vitamins. I do think people really should be supplementing with B12,
right?
And if they don't get sun. And you can just buy those at the store. If you are getting a multiple vitamin, if you go online, you will see brands that are called vitamins only. And that's okay, because you're not going to hurt yourself with the vitamins. They leave the minerals out, and that's a good idea.
Good to know. Good to know. Well, zinc, we talked about zinc, earlier on, that one of the things that you're going to find being inside these beta amyloid plaques. But it seems like the zinc has a different role than the copper and iron, and seems to encourage these beta amyloid proteins to clump together. How does this work, and why?
The science is still being written as we speak. The ink is not yet dry. But as you said, the zinc seems to grab the beta amyloid protein strands and help them to clump together in some way. Now, when I wrote Power Foods for the Brain, I was quite concerned about zinc as being a toxin. My thinking on this is evolving, and I'm now at the moment, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure zinc is a bad actor, and that's, if I know that in science we hate to have any kind of hesitancy or we hate to change opinions, but let me step up here. I have two kind of thoughts about it. The first is that I think zinc might be able to counteract the effects of copper to a degree. And secondly, I'm not so sure that the clumping of the beta amyloid is the problem. It may be, but it may well be. And this is a part of science where researchers still don't know the answer. Is the formation of those beta amyloid plaques, is that the bad thing? Or are those plaques defensive? Are they trying to grab the iron and grab the copper and keep them away from the blood cells? So if zinc just causes the clumping, maybe that's not really the problem.
Almost like a piece of sand in an oyster.
Yeah, perfect. Wow, why didn't I think of that analogy? Can I borrow that? That's great. that's exactly it. So the oyster is trying to protect itself.
Exactly.
So again, we don't know the answer to this, but where I've come down is that I'm worried about copper, I'm worried about iron, I'm not so sure about zinc.
Okay. So where are these metals coming from? And before you get into that, I'm just going to share a story with you because
Sure.
I'm a chemistry teacher, and one of the things that I do as a demonstration is I take some breakfast cereals and I grind it up with a mortar and pestle, and then I just put it in with some distilled water, and I have a magnetic spinner. And I pull the magnet out, and sure enough, there's iron filings attached to the magnet.
Yes.
So my question to you, first of all, is where are these metals coming from, apart from like fortified cereals like that? And can we eat that form of iron?
What you're pointing out is exactly the issue that we have. Is somebody takes an innocent box of cereal with some whole grains in it, and not only do they throw in sugar and colors and all kinds of stuff, but they're throwing in iron and throwing in copper, and then they want to advertise that it has complete nutrition for your child. You should not be giving that stuff to your kids. And apart from all the other things that are in the cereal, your child is already getting iron and copper in other foods. It does not have to be added. And anyway, so that's the issue. Can you eat it? A person can, but should they know? It's absorbed.
Are you going to digest that?
Yeah,
I mean, they're iron filing pieces.
Yes, you're going to absorb it. Yes, you are.
Okay.
Keep in mind the digestive tract is a creative thing. It finds ways to bring any old thing into your body. So you've got stomach acid, you've got a lot of enzymes, and it will tear that up and it will absorb it. Yeah, it sure will. Yes, even if it is elemental iron. Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
right.
and you don't want that, but that's not the only source. Cast iron pans. Everybody loves them because we think of our grandma's kitchen having cast iron pans. And if you use it once a month, who cares? But if it's your daily go-to pan and the food is stirring around in your cast iron pan, some of that iron from the pan is coming in and you're going to get it in your body and you're going to absorb that. Public enemy number one is meat. The cow has been eating grass. The grass has iron in it, but it will concentrate in the muscle tissue. And so back in the 1950s, great, the more meat, the better, plenty of iron. Now we know that it's a contributor to all the problems of metal excess. And in fact, for extra credit, let me just mention this. There's two different forms of iron. Can we talk about that? Oh, good. All right. Okay. All right. Sorry about this. Okay. Oh, stainless steel is okay. And the modern non-stick ones are okay too. They got a non-stick coating. So yeah. Okay. And by the way, this is not a reason to buy an aluminum pan, because hopefully we'll talk about aluminum.
Oh yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's come back to that topic.
Absolutely.
Because
two forms of iron.
Yeah.
Two forms of iron.
Two forms of iron. Okay. Plants. If you eat spinach, it's got lots of iron in it. Green vegetables have lots of iron.
Popeye,
you got it. The form of iron that's in plants is great. It's exactly what we're designed to eat, because here's what happens. If you are low in iron, You haven't been eating things. Your body doesn't have enough iron. You can absorb this form of iron more. If you're already a little iron overloaded, you absorb it less. This type of iron is called non-heme iron, and it's great. It's the iron your body was designed for. You need it, you can absorb it more. If you don't need it, you absorb it less. You keep it out. Your intestinal tract does this for you automatically.
Wow.
Now there's some of this in meat, but there's also what's called heme iron. And heme iron is like a friend who barges into your party, whether you want them there or not. You might be iron overloaded and you have meat and the extra iron just keeps coming into your body, coming in. Your body can't regulate it so much. So this is part of why we often say that human beings really are herbivores, because our bodies cannot really handle the iron that's in meat. We're not designed for it. We don't have any ability to regulate it at all, but we can regulate. We've got the biological ability to regulate iron from plants. So we want to get our iron from plants, not animals. You'll get the iron you need without the excess. And by the way, lest anyone think, oh, gee, yeah, but there's just no iron in those. There's plenty. When we transition people to vegan diets to help them lose weight or improve their diabetes, we track their iron intake, and it's as much or more than it was before. They're not low in iron at all. They're not at risk for becoming anemic. But they're getting non-heme iron, which is the good form, which your body can handle. It's less likely to do harm than the heme iron in meat.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Oh, this one's coming up. Mercury. Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm from the generation that I had those amalgams,
Right.
in my mouth. And I was very fortunate that my my undergrad college teacher said, get them out. And
Wow.
yes,
You were ahead of your time.
he was. He absolutely was. And as soon as I graduated and had money, because I was one of those poor college students, I put myself through school. And he told me right away, as soon as you can, get them out. And I did. Yeah. And I cleaned my mouth out. But and quietly, the dental industry is kind of getting away from that. But let's talk about mercury and some of the issues. I mean, because it's not just the dental amalgams. I mean, it's environmental and.
Oh yeah, well for sure. It was used routinely in dental practice, and so people would have 8 fillings of all mercury, and then the whole question is it doing harm? The big issue was fish consumption, because fish are the only animals that people eat that happen to be carnivores. So what that means, like a cow is not eating another animal, neither is a pig. But on the other hand, fish, the little fish that's on the ocean bottom, eating the mercury that came out of industrial waste or whatever, is consumed by another fish and another fish and another fish. And eventually a huge big tuna comes along and eats the medium-sized fish. And then that tuna ends up in a can in the grocery store. And if you send it to the lab, you'll find mercury in it. No big surprise, because it's bioconcentrating up this food chain. Now, we just shouldn't be in a food chain at all. If we ate plants, our risk of mercury exposure wouldn't be so much of a problem. And mercury is a toxin. I mean, everybody knows that. In your school, if somebody spilled mercury, you'd evacuate the school. Everyone goes into a panic. Well, sure, just buy some cans of tuna, or whatever. And now, don't get me wrong, the amount is not the same as a spill in a chemistry lab, but it's enough to be worried about, and enough for the government to give recommendations for pregnant women and for kids to avoid these foods. Well, your brain is a delicate thing. I want to avoid neurotoxins.
Well, first of all, what does the word bioaccumulative mean? And is mercury bioaccumulative? And are we going to see this in these plaques?
Yes, and maybe. Bioaccumulative means that something accumulates in your body over time and doesn't go away. Mercury does seem to be accumulative. Your body has trouble getting rid of it. It is a clear-cut neurotoxin.
Well, that's what the Mad Hatters, Alice in Wonderland, the Mad Hatter. I mean, because in Danbury, Connecticut, they used to make the hats, and they used mercury in the hat making process. And people at one point, you just started going mad.
Well, when we were kids, we used to play with mercury.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I used to break open the thermometer.
And play with it because it's this fun thing.
Oh my God, it's amazing to play with. Maybe that explains my issues today. I don't know.
Well, people used to take DDT and powder their dog with it and all. Before we knew, better living through chemistry sometimes, but not always.
No. Most of it has not been really that great.
Yeah.
But okay, well, What about those mercury, the fillings? Is that causing issues? Is it going to have an impact?
I don't think anybody really knows the answer to that, but I'm with you. My feeling is err on the side of caution, get rid of them. When this came up, I think it was really maybe in the 80s where people were talking about it a fair amount, maybe a little bit before that. The question was, is it safer to take them out? Or could, in the process of taking it out, liberate this mercury, and then you're going to inhale it, and then you're going to poison yourself? And by and large, nobody knows for sure, but my best guess is that the risks of removing them are far less than the risks of keeping them. Or maybe to put it the other way, the most prudent thing to do, erring on the side of caution, is just get rid of them.
Yeah. Well, when I'm on marriage number 2, hopefully this is it. And when we got married, I don't know how mercury came up in the conversation, don't know. But we started talking about it, and I asked my husband, my husband's like, well, how do I know if I still have amalgams? I said, open your mouth. Oh my God, he had 9 of them. So I'm like on the phone going to the dentist going, excuse me, I want to schedule, we're getting these out.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't take them out all at once, and he had a very specific protocol. And when he went in, I mean, my husband was given oxygen, they had a mask. It was I was very impressed, because when I did mine back way in the day, when I was in my 20s, there wasn't nothing that existed. But now today, for him, when he did that and had it refilled with porcelain, wow, big difference.
They're very careful because they don't want the dental hygienist or the dentist to inhale it. So you think if you had left it there, and you're exposed to it 24/7, isn't that an issue? So these are all areas where there are a lot of unknowns. And I think some credible people could say, no problem, leave it, they won't hurt you. But my usual way of trying to resolve ambiguity is to err on the side of caution. And I think in this case, caution says get rid of them.
I'm right with you. As soon as I saw that, my husband, we just got married, I'm on the phone. Dentist, nope, done.
Yeah. He's lucky to have you. I think you're telling him the right thing.
Well, but there's also, I think there was some links between that, and he's dealt with MS, and I think there was some some of the research dealing with mercury and MS. So we wanted to get that out.
Good.
So years ago, nutritionists, were concerned that people wouldn't get enough iron and zinc in their diets if they weren't eating animal products. Is this still an issue?
It is not an issue. And in fact, it never was an issue. It was a worry, but a completely misplaced worry. There's plenty of iron in green leafy vegetables. Beans also are high in iron, but in the non-heme iron that your body can regulate. So you're going to be fine. Now, if a person never eats green vegetables and never eats beans, well, bring them into your diet. You do want to have them, but you never need the iron that's in meats. And for the most part, you don't need it in supplements. My only exception, let's say a person has had blood loss for some reason, and the doctor says, you're anemic. If the doctor says you should supplement iron, fine. Because what the doctor's looking at are your blood tests, and can know if added iron is indicated or can be harmful.
Well, let's talk about aluminum. I mean, do we need aluminum in our body?
No, that's an amazing thing. You need a little bit of iron. You need a little bit of copper. There's a lot of things that you need, but aluminum, no, you don't need aluminum at all, zero. In fact, your body tries to get rid of it. If you are exposed to it in one way or another, your body tries to eliminate it. Now, it's not so good at that. When people have been exposed to excess aluminum in industrial accidents, for example, it's a neurotoxin. But the way this got linked to Alzheimer's disease is a little bit curious. Aluminum is added to drinking water. Now, when the water is coming down in the river or out of a well, there isn't aluminum in it, but it's cloudy and murky, and so you add aluminum and that clears it up. That causes this solids to precipitate. But you then have to remove the aluminum, and some municipalities aren't so good at that. So you turn on the faucet, and out comes this water that's got aluminum in it. And decades ago in Britain, certain counties were found to have high aluminum in their normal drinking water. And their Alzheimer's prevalence was about 50% higher than the low aluminum counties. So that made everybody panic and said, okay, aluminum is a clear-cut neurotoxin. No question about that. You're getting traces of it in your water. This could be, over time, damaging the brain. Researchers in France found the same result pretty much. Researchers in Canada, some mixed results, but by and large, this is the same kind of pattern. Now, that said, there are really good neurologists who will say, I'm not convinced. I'm not sure that aluminum is going to hurt you at all. I think the issues about Alzheimer's are elsewhere. Don't even worry about it. Maybe they're right. However, let me come back. Let's err on the side of caution. Do you need aluminum? No. Is it toxic? Yes. Is your body trying to get rid of it? Yes. How about identifying the sources of it and just avoiding them? And it's really easy to do. So you got one brain, and my suggestion is that people err on the side of caution and not expose themselves to aluminum.
Well, okay, here's the big question: is where are these? Where is it coming from?
Okay, really easy. In fact, you can make choices with just when you purchase. When I was a kid, we had really cheap cookware made of aluminum. And so you're stirring your spaghetti sauce, and you can just almost see the aluminum being pitted by the acids in the food. So it goes right into the food. If you had gotten, at that time, what was your choice? Your choice would be a steel pan or whatever. Steel would have been better. The new Nonsticks are really good. They don't fracture, they don't release the little bits of Teflon into your food.
But like I've got the Nonstick, the ceramic pans, which are covering aluminum. And there's a different expansion rate going on here. You've got a different rate between ceramic expanding and the aluminum. So the expansion, contraction, over about a 6-month period, you start to see pits in the pan. So the little pieces of the ceramic are breaking off, and now you've got aluminum base that's being exposed.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because it turns out that there are certain brands of pans where exactly what you said. Here's an aluminum pan, and they put a nonstick coating over the top. And then your concern is, over time, what's going to happen? Is the aluminum going to somehow leach through or leak through in some way? I'm with you. I think that's bad. So you pay a few more bucks, and you will get a pan that's a sandwich, where it's this nonstick coating. Directly underneath it is steel, stainless steel. And underneath that, there might be an aluminum layer. They like to layer it like a sandwich. It has something to do with the heat conduction or whatever. But the aluminum is not the layer. It's not the layer. It doesn't touch the food, and it doesn't even touch the nonstick surface. It's buried in the middle. I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that's okay. But yeah, you'll see those. There's a brand called Demeyer, Demeyer, where they make a variety of more expensive and less expensive pans. But if the advertising is correct, underneath that nonstick coating is stainless steel.
Good to know.
But now there are some other issues too.
Yeah.
You got an acid stomach. My dad used to have acid stomach all the time. And so he would drink Maalox all the time. Well, you're a chemist. Maalox is magnesium and aluminum hydroxide. You're drinking aluminum. If he had bought Tums, there's any number of antacids that don't have aluminum on it. It's right on the label. You can pick one. One that has aluminum, pick one that doesn't have aluminum. Baking powder. You go to the store. Right on the shelf is the baking powder with aluminum and the one that says aluminum free. They cost the same. Here's a funny one. Antiperspirants versus deodorants. If you buy an antiperspirant, look at the label. It has aluminum in it. It has been explained to me that the little bits of aluminum will clog the sweat glands. Whether that's really true or not, I don't know, but that's the explanation. If you buy a deodorant that does not say antiperspirant and look at the label, you have to search around, but you'll find them that don't have aluminum at all. They work perfectly fine. Is the aluminum, will it go through the skin? Yes, it will.
And you need to be careful about that, because even like a deodorant, like there's different brands out there, but they say that it's a crystal. And what they're doing is, and it's all marketing. It's all smoke and mirrors, okay? Because on the front they say, aluminum chlorohydrate free or paraben free. And they've got all these things that it's free. My girlfriend came over and she had her armpits were just irritated beyond belief. And I said, "Oh my God, what are you using?" She said, "Oh, no, it's good. I got this at the local store, which is a health food store." And I said, "Just because you get it from there doesn't mean it's going to be good." Okay. They have better stuff, but not all of it. You have to be an ingredient detective. So I look on the back, and they had written on the back potassium alum, and in parentheses they wrote mineral salts. And she says, well, mineral salts are natural. And I said, well, so's arsenic, and I really don't want that in my food or whatever.
Yeah.
I said, but a salt, and people have to understand what a salt is. It's an ionic compound, and it's a positive and negative ion. So what they were doing is using the common name. So potassium alum is actually potassium aluminum silicate.
Right. Yes, that is exactly right. And so people naively will buy that thinking it's aluminum free, but it's exactly the same thing. However, if you buy like Tom's of Maine or something like that, it'll say aluminum free, and it's true. So, and by the way, they work perfectly well. When people use them in adequate amounts, they are quite effective. One other thing, you are on the road and you stop at the rest area or something like that, and you go in and have a cup of coffee, and they'll have the little creamers next to salt and pepper, these little packets. And they often have aluminum added to keep it powdery so that when it gets humid, it will not clump. Be really careful about that. I'm here to just cheer everybody up that everything in their life is toxic.
What about aluminum foil?
I believe, well, it's clearly aluminum. I believe that if it is surrounding something like a sandwich where there's nothing acidic, I think it's going to be okay. If it's the little pan that you took home from the Italian restaurant with your leftover spaghetti and so forth in it, my guess is it's going to leak into the food.
Because I still use aluminum foil, but what I do is I put parchment paper down first and then cover it with aluminum foil.
By the way, that's something you can do in pans as well. I have not tried this, but one of my dietitians just the other day was saying, when you're trying to cook without oil, which is a great thing to do, you can put parchment paper in the pans, right. You're way ahead of me. This to me from, Fargo, North Dakota, non-cooking doctor. To me, this is a revelation that you could use that. So anyway, those are a few things. Bottom line, aluminum is a toxin. We know, I believe it is probably a contributor to Alzheimer's disease, but the best thing to do is, in my view, just be cautious, err on the side of caution, and don't expose yourself to it. And if 50 years from now, aluminum is somehow exonerated, swell, you won't have done yourself any harm because you just don't need it.
So what can we do to shield and protect ourselves?
Okay. There's so many things that we can do with regard to metals, which we've been talking about.
Right.
Don't use that cast iron pan, or use it only very rarely. If you have copper pipes, which you may have in your home, great for washing your hands with and whatever, but you don't want to drink that.
Well, what about if you're bringing the copper in? Would it be better to use cold water as opposed to hot water?
If it's sitting in the pipe overnight, even in the cold water pipes, you'll still get it. Now, you can use bottled water for drinking. That's fine. You can get a filter. If you have the reverse osmosis filters, are the ones that remove the aluminum. So the little one you snap on your faucet, it's not going to do it. But a reverse osmosis filter will remove it, or just get bottled water. You have the big bottles delivered every month or whatever it is. Every bottled water brand that I have seen has been aluminum free and is safe. So if we just make some of these decisions, you can reduce your exposure to these things. Obviously, people should not be eating meat, and we all grew up with it. But meat gives you this iron your body can't regulate, in addition to giving you cholesterol and bad fat. And we want to get our iron from green leafy vegetables and healthy foods like that. So vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, that's a healthy diet.
All right. Well, we'll see you in the next series.
I look forward to it.